This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
French President Emmanuel Macron says the beheading of a teacher in Paris was an Islamist attack. Libya resumes flights between Tripoli and Benghazi after nearly 2 years. And governments across Europe roll out new restrictions following a surge in COVID-19 cases. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua. Also coming up. In business, Egypt's economy records an upturn in September as consumer demand rises and business activity resumes. And in sports, the Confederation of African Football confirms Cairo will host this year's CAF Champions League final. We begin the hour in France, where a school teacher has been decapitated in a Paris suburb after he showed his class cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad from the satirical weekly publication Charlie Hebdo. French President Emmanuel Macron, speaking at the scene, decried the teacher's murder.
One of our citizens was murdered today because he was teaching. He was teaching students about freedom of expression, the liberty to believe and not believe. Our compatriot was flagrantly attacked. He was a victim of an Islamist terrorist attack.
The suspect is reportedly an 18-year-old man born in Moscow. Police say he was shot and died later due to injuries as they tried to arrest him. Reports also say 5 more people have been detained, including the parents of a child at the school where the teacher was working. France has seen a wave of Islamist violence since 2015 over Charlie Hebdo. 2 people were stabbed outside the magazine's former offices 3 weeks ago. To North Africa now, Libya has resumed flight operations between its major cities of Tripoli and Benghazi. Officials at the state-owned Africa Airways say the first flight landed in Benghazi on Friday. Air transport between the 2 cities has been halted for nearly 2 years. It resulted from the rivalry between the Tripoli-based government of National Accord and the Libyan National Army that controls most of the east, including Benghazi. The resumption of flights comes weeks after oil production also resumed after a year of stalling. Well, for more on that story, we're now joined by Adel Makroui, who joins us live from Cairo. Adel, thank you for joining us. Tell us more about the resumption of flights between the 2 cities. Also, how did the 2 sides finally reach an agreement on this?
So basically, this is the first flight, as you briefly mentioned, and it's just a remarkable step that is basically showing that Libya is becoming once again one nation, having internal flights between the divided regions. We have 3 main regions in Libya: East, West, and the South. And according to Africa Airlines, the national carrier for Libya, that the flights will not only resume between the East and West, but also with the South as well. And this is a great sign that Libyans are now free to move within the cities of their own countries. The polarization that both 3 sectors, or at least the main 2 east and western blocks, have been moving forward, banning those from the east to go to the west or the other way, or at least hindering the process of free movement for Libyans. This is all a great indication that the country is coming over and is getting over its division and moving towards a more of inclusive policy, or an inclusion policy that will have joint nation in general. So basically the airline, for instance, had been, and the aviation sector has been managed independently by the eastern and western side. This is now coming together as flights will be circulating around the country. The main point that has led to that was basically the 5+5 military talks that were held here in Egypt in Hurghada city, and this is where For the first time, the Libyan rivals that represented the military powers of both sides sat together and started drafting agreeing on certain points. Among them was opening up airspace between the three territories and opening all restrictions, even on highways, between Libyan cities.
And of course, Adele, there have been positive steps towards reuniting Libya in recent weeks. What exactly is the significance now of the resumption of flights in the quest for a reunited country?
So basically this shows that Libyans are now moving on with life, that the political division is no longer hindering the country from moving forward, and that airspace will be open and travel will be open. Institutions that have been divided and managed independently will now reunite into a united form of management that will more or less gather the entire logistics plans for their own institutions across the country, while the political talks will be moving independently. And it is also a great indication that the political negotiations, the military negotiations, and the economic ones as well, that the United Nations will be leading starting the end of October, will be getting support domestically. As the country is no longer in a war, the country is no longer divided, the country is moving towards unity physically, and politically there are negotiations that are trying to reach middle grounds.
All right, Adele, thank you very much for that. CGTN's Adele Mahroui joining us live there from Cairo, Egypt. Well, taking you to the opposite end of the continent, South Africa is now no longer among the top 10 countries worst affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The infection rate in South Africa has largely plateaued, and health facilities are reporting that they have enough capacity to handle the seriously ill. In the Western Cape, most temporary hospitals have closed, but authorities there are keen not to let their guard down. CGTN's Travis Andrews now reports.
It's been a long and challenging campaign to contain the spread of COVID-19 in South Africa, but the tide is turning, and the country has passed its initial surge in cases. Health officials credit the inroads made in combating the disease to a cohesive health strategy.
One of the things that we've had, I must say, decisive leadership around COVID-19 in the country, and particularly if I look at the Western Cape as an example of that decisive leadership. Decisive and agile, I must add. So from the beginning of this pandemic, we followed a data-led and evidence-informed strategy. So we looked at the data, we listened to what the scientists were telling us about COVID, we looked at international examples around the world, and we brought those lessons into the province.
The Western Cape was once the epicenter of COVID-19 in the country, with more than 5,000 healthcare workers contracting the virus, 38 of which died from the disease. Now the testing strategy has greatly improved, and health officials say they're already planning for a potential second wave, as is being seen in Europe.
So what we're doing in the province, we really have an excellent data center, and we have 4 key indicators that we measure on a daily basis, and that helps us to determine whether there's a resurgence or possible second wave. We have found, while the numbers in the province are generally going down, all our indicators are going down, the cases are going down, hospitalizations going down, even the death rates going down. We have found areas in recent weeks where the caseload has started increasing again.
And that increase has been attributed to the behavior of people that has resulted in super spreading events. But it's something city officials are closely monitoring, especially as they move to open up the economy even further.
We had to put in a lot of measures to make sure that we bring down the infection rate, and that locals and visitors also strictly adhere to those health protocols. And then the business establishments, by implementing all the different health measures that are now mandatory. So it's a whole of city approach.
While South Africa's COVID-19 infection rate may have stabilized, in the Western Cape there remains some concern about pockets of new infections, including a recent super spreader event that emanated from a local bar and led to 89 people being infected. Now, health officials here say this is something they're keen to avoid, especially as the summer season approaches, the economy begins to open up, and more people begin to socialize. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And turning to the surge in cases in Europe, governments across the continent are rolling out new restrictions to deal with an early winter spike. However, as Rahul Pathak reports, they're not going down too well with residents.
Anger and frustration on the streets of Barcelona on Friday. Thousands of workers from Catalonia's hospitality industry making themselves heard. They were protesting at the regional government's decision to close all bars and restaurants in the region for 2 weeks, the order coming into force at midnight on Thursday. The Catalan Premier insists the recent surge in COVID-19 cases has been so alarming he had to bring in tough measures now so as to avoid going back into a full lockdown later. Now, the issue that bar and restaurant owners in Barcelona have is that currently the infection rate in Catalonia is 263 cases per 100,000 people. That's exactly the Spain national average. Compare that to Madrid, where the rate is nearly double that, and yet the bars and restaurants remain open. Elsewhere, France has reimposed its state of health emergency following a record rise on Thursday of over 30,000 new daily infections in the country. President Macron said that the new measures for Paris and 8 other major cities include a curfew where residents will be confined to their homes from 9 p.m. until 6 a.m. Private gatherings are now restricted to no more than 6 people. All the new measures are expected to remain in place for at least 4 weeks. In the southern Italian region of Campania, schools have decided to close their doors to help slow the spread of the coronavirus. Local authorities, such as the one that governs Naples, Italy's third largest city, have opted to keep children away from school whilst continuing classes online. It's not a decision welcomed by the central government.
The contagion curve at school is very, very low. This means that we've been working efficiently to achieve a high level of safety for our children. This is also down to the schools themselves, people who work in those schools and the students. So to close schools altogether in this way is not the best solution.
Italy recorded its highest daily infection rate on Thursday with close to 9,000 new cases. Europe set a record this week for new infections, surpassing the United States in cases per capita. That makes the continent once again the epicenter of the crisis. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
And moving away from the coronavirus, a taxi hailing service operated by women in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo has caught the attention of many locals accustomed to seeing men in the driver's seat of taxis. The company has employed female drivers in a bid to empower them economically and get passengers safely to their destinations. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more in this report.
This pink and grey taxi stands out from the yellow taxis that are common in Kinshasa. And it's not just the color that sets it apart. UBIS cabs, which stands for Universal Bisolé cabs, are driven by women. Zawadi Mitima is a university graduate who's been driving them for a year now.
Many of us women are responsible drivers. I plan my journey and ensure that my client travels safely. I don't ever rush to get our clients to their destination. I believe female drivers are more calm on the road.
The company prides itself on reliable and safe travels around the city. These taxis have tracking devices that ensure that the women behind the wheels get their passengers safely to their destination. That's a big issue in Kinshasa because of an increase in kidnappings by people posing as taxi drivers. UBIS Cabs was launched 2 years ago by Congolese entrepreneur Patricia Nzolantima. She got the company name from her nickname Bizoli.
I decided to employ female drivers because I believe it will go a long way in empowering women financially. Many women here are marginalized. I started working on this project 5 years ago, and I'm glad it has come to fruition.
Patricia studied business management at Harvard and Stanford in the US. She even met former US President Bill Clinton.
One of the very important things that has made me succeed in this business is my faith in God. Without it, I wouldn't have stayed focused on my vision. I have overcome many challenges because of my faith.
Her business has grown significantly over the past 2 years. She's now set up an academy to train more drivers. The company has also ventured into motorcycle delivery services.
The emancipation of women is about us being given opportunities to do jobs that men have traditionally been doing. Many people get shocked when they see us riding these motorcycles. My life has really changed now.
But it will take longer to change the attitudes of some Congolese men who believe a woman's place is in the kitchen.
I was very shocked to see women driving taxis in this city. I kept asking myself what was going on. It's something very extraordinary.
As for these women, getting to this point is a good start. It's breaking gender stereotypes and already made a difference in their lives. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, it's time for us to take a short break here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. We tell you how one community in South Africa is working to overcome hunger in the face of the coronavirus pandemic. And Uganda is turning Kampala into a tourism attraction center to boost domestic visitor numbers.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back. Now, today is International Day for the Eradication of Poverty and also China's National Poverty Relief Day. President Xi Jinping is calling on local governments to ensure the sustainability of its fight against poverty. He said the battle to eliminate poverty has reached the final stage. CPC party committees and governments at all levels must maintain the stability of poverty eradication policies and implement measures to consolidate the gains from these efforts. He added that the government will not retreat without a complete victory. Over the past 5 years, China has allocated over 530 billion yuan or 79 billion US dollars from the central budget for poverty relief projects, and over 50 million more people have been lifted from poverty. Well, Friday marked the World Food Day. This year, the issue of food security has become even bigger and more critical. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to increased hunger for millions around the world. In South Africa, the pandemic has also taken its toll on employment and, in turn, the state of food accessibility. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela visited a community that is working to overcome this kind of hunger and poverty.
World Food Day calls for global solidarity to help all populations. Here in South Africa, the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Thoko Didiza, commemorated the day by visiting rural communities that have been specifically hit hard as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's also communities who were able to make means and survive as a result of agricultural projects that they embarked on. Projects that were mostly led by rural women.
We know the conditions around which rural women in particular operate, where there are challenges of scarcity of land, where there are challenges of water, but also challenges of infrastructure that enables them to be able to farm, at the scale at which they would want to. We are also aware of the disruptions that COVID has caused and its impact, particularly on rural women.
And as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to ravage many societies, these women were able to survive as a direct result of their small-holding farming.
I was unemployed and was a single mother. I had nothing at all. Then I started here, and now I'm living better, as well as my family. We sell the vegetables, and this brings some money. Not much, but the little we get, we use to help our families.
Minister Didiza told the community of Bronkhorstspruit, just outside capital Pretoria, that their role is key, as small-holding farming is crucial to food security.
In the way in which it has performed, because as you know, that one of the interventions that government made, even during the stringent lockdown, when we were containing the spread of the virus, agriculture was allowed to operate to ensure that there can be food availability for our society, even during these challenging times.
According to the United Nations, smallholder farming is crucial for producing food and sustaining millions of livelihoods in developing countries. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Bronkhorstspruit, South Africa.
Uganda is turning its capital city, Kampala, into a tourism attraction center in an attempt to boost domestic visitor numbers. Local authorities have erected sculptures that represent the country's wildlife, hoping it'll also encourage people to leave the city to see what's on offer. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga now reports.
This sculpture has become a major attraction in the capital, Kampala. It is strategically placed on Kira Road, one of Kampala's busiest streets.
When I walk along these streets, I get to see the art pieces that actually mean a lot to me, because I get to know the big five, I get to know the endangered species in the world.
And most sculptures of birds and animals are standing tall on the street. This art piece depicts one of the rare bird species in the world, the shoebill. Conservationists here believe such displays will help promote domestic tourism. Uganda is rich in flora and fauna, but few locals visit the national parks to view it.
All these national parks are the borders. So there are very many Ugandans who have never even seen these animals. So when when they see this, they say, oh, you mean I can see this live in a national park? Then this can entice that very person and say, okay, let me go and see this very animal.
Uganda receives about 1.8 million tourists annually at its tourism parks and sites. Less than a third of those are usually local tourists. The new initiative has started yielding positive results.
Crested crane, it has all these colors. So why not see the live one, like the real one that is moving somewhere in the park, in the green pasture or something? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Tourism is Uganda's top foreign exchange earner. Last year, the country earned $1.6 billion in revenue. But the industry has been hit hard by the outbreak of COVID-19, something which affects people's expenditure on leisure. Hopefully, as the government rolls out this initiative and also offers incentives to the locals, it could boost domestic tourism. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala.
And crossing the border into Kenya, a group of women have developed a wildlife conservation strategy that revolves around agribusiness. They're farming aloe vera near Tsavo East National Park. The women use the plant to make beauty and cleaning products. CGTN's Enoch Sikolia brings us their story.
The protected conservation area around Voi Town in the south of Kenya.
It's home to more species than almost anywhere else in the East African region. Voi has seen exponential economic growth in the last decade, but farmland and settlements have interrupted animal migratory routes. Joyce Ngolopa is part of a group of women from the Taita community. They have been working to mitigate human-wildlife conflicts that are on the rise. Instead of traditional staples, these women are growing aloe vera.
The elephants actually are very much near us, and they come and spoil our crops. They spoil maize, they spoil other plants. But they told us, if you plant aloe vera, aloe will not be touched by elephants. And it is true, elephants don't spoil aloe vera.
On top of keeping elephants at bay, Voi is an area punctuated with unpredictable weather and food insecurity.
For example, if it rains today, we will plant and harvest well, but then 2 poor seasons will follow that, and sometimes when you plant during a good season, elephants come and destroy.
Confronted with the twin challenges of climate change and wildlife, the group began growing aloe vera 6 years ago.
Aloe vera, a drought-resistant plant that has a huge conservation impact despite its small size.
And the women don't stop with just farming the aloe vera. The group produces soap and other products from the medicinal plant.
You collect the drops. From the drops, then you mix that drop with with water and oil, then you get the soap. From the soap, then we get lotion, we have the cream, we also have shampoo. All these we call them herbal products, beauty herbal products. They're actually herbal because of aloe. And we sell now, we sell locally.
Ngolopa says their venture helps members of the group secure their livelihoods. The group, in collaboration with the Kenya Wildlife Service, has also been educating members of the wider community on the importance of wildlife conservation. Ngolopa says that poaching around the national park has decreased as a result. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN, Voi.
Let's take you to Ghana now, where a social entrepreneur, Makafui Awuku, is tackling plastic pollution in Accra by recycling plastic waste to make sandals. Awuku's project is linked to a waste buyback program that aims to encourage people to separate plastics from household waste so they can exchange it for money. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Thank you. Where some see trash, Makafui Awuku sees wealth. People collect plastic waste off the streets and sell to him. He then recycles the plastic waste for other products.
When the waste comes to our end, it goes to a recycling hub where it is shredded into small pieces, and then it comes to our facility where it is sanitized, it is treated with rubbing alcohol, it is dried in the sun.
Makafui set up a social entrepreneurship company, Macintosh Africa, in 2018 to tackle plastic pollution in Ghana. He first started by using the plastic waste for art pieces. Now, his new project involves making sandals with the waste. The shredded plastic waste is turned into a leather-like material like this. Makafui says it takes about 30 minutes to produce about half a yard of it. The material made with recycled plastic waste is then used to make these sandals. Makafui's innovation is not only fighting plastic pollution, but also providing jobs for other young people. Those who buy the sandals say it's their small way of saving the environment from plastic pollution.
I just bought one and it's very nice. It's durable, but I just like the fact that they are reducing the plastic waste in our country.
Out of the 1 million tons of plastic waste Ghana generates annually, only 2 to 5% is recycled. Most ends up at landfills and along the country's beaches.
I'm hoping that with this project, we should be able to start moving towards 10, 15, 20 to 30% of waste being recycled in this way, so that, in the long term, we can create more jobs, not just jobs, but these are cleaner jobs.
Makafui wants to produce more than 5,000 pairs of sandals in the next 12 months. He hopes to rate the environment of plastic waste 1 pair of sandals at a time. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, here's what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Egypt's economy records an upturn in September as consumer demand rises and business activity resumes.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's begin in Egypt, where the country's non-oil private sector expanded for the first time in 14 months in September on the back of a rise in consumer demand and strengthened business activity. This indicates the first month of economic expansion since July 2019 and potentially signaling a modest turnaround after the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
Many countries across the globe have witnessed the pandemic-related economic fallout during the year, including Egypt. The North African state has, however, experienced a quick turnaround in the non-petroleum sector that has recorded modest growth in 3 consecutive months.
More than $12.7 billion has been pumped into the market to support it against the effects of the coronavirus, especially the huge drop in supply and demand. The expansion is driven by local production and exports. Exports this year are the second highest in the last 20 years for Egypt, while growth in businesses has been the highest in 5 years.
Agricultural products are Egypt's leading exports over the last few years, recording an increase of 4.5 million tons in 2020. This has helped raise the gauge above the 50 mark that separates expansion from contraction. Multiple mega infrastructure projects funded by the government and constructed by local companies have given a major boost to the private sector. Real estate and industrial sectors have also received a lot of support from the government. This has created employment opportunities, more production, and more demand from local consumers, which translates into higher revenue for the private sector. While there is optimism for a strong economic outlook, there are still challenges that needs to be addressed.
The confidence in the strength of Egypt's economy to withstand the global crisis is owed to reforms launched in 2016 and which have earned the trust of international investors amid the coronavirus pandemic. The monetary policy has succeeded in encouraging investors to look at Egypt, but what we need is to provide more facilities and less complicated procedures for new companies and industries to set up. It's a major hindrance for the private sector.
Although the numbers are positive, experts say there's still a lot of work to be done to achieve the targets set by the government in improving the economic outlook. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The Sudanese government has signed a memorandum of understanding with General Electric to increase power generation by up to 470 megawatts. In a statement, GE says it plans to deliver electricity to about 600,000 households through mobile turbines that can be installed within months. It'll also rehabilitate 3 existing power plants. The company says it is also exploring cooperation on further power and health projects. Sudan's cabinet said on Wednesday that it was planning to boost output at a power plant in El Fula, West Kordofan, at a total cost of $915 million.
For 30 years, Sudan has remained stunted, not dealing with large companies like General Electric. Today, the Memorandum of Understanding will open the door to various sectors. GE operates in various sectors, including electricity, of course, energy in general, as well as healthcare. Today's Memorandum of Understanding concerns two sectors, energy and healthcare. The memorandum opens the door for the first project that provides 470 megawatts, which will provide electricity to 600,000 homes.
This memorandum is a step towards a long relationship with the Sudanese government to provide the necessary energy and to improve the network for energy transportation, as well as the development and improvement of the healthcare system's infrastructure. These include X-ray machines or machines for the heart and tumors, as well as first aid units, especially those in rural areas and villages.
Now, according to the World Bank, the risk that Ghana may be unable to pay its debt is growing. The country's debt hit $45.4 billion, about 68% of GDP in July. Economists say the coronavirus pandemic has partly contributed to the increase in debt, as the country borrowed more this year to reduce the impact of the pandemic. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Ghana's tax revenues took a nosedive when it went into lockdown in March due to the coronavirus pandemic, falling by 26% in the first half of the year. The shortfall meant the government had to borrow more to fund unplanned spending, especially within the health sector.
Expenditure on infrastructure has been going down in the country. It means the amounts of money the country has been borrowing is not being spent on infrastructure, which will expand the productive base of the country. But they are going into social intervention programs, things that may be of benefit to the poor in the short term, but it is not reflecting in the growth potential of the country. And for that matter, repaying these amounts of monies you have borrowed is becoming very difficult.
Ghana's debt jumped to $45.4 billion in July from $37.6 billion last year. The government says the increase is mainly due to the borrowing of $3 billion from the international market, coupled with the effect of COVID-19 and the weakening cedi against the US dollar. Ghana has lifted lockdown restrictions and the economy has begun to bounce back. The IMF says the economy will grow by 0.9% by the end of this year. But economists want the government to do more in raising internal revenue, especially from the country's natural resources like oil, so it can reduce its borrowing.
The country is just not generating enough. And I keep on saying, you cannot tax poor people and be able to raise so much revenue to develop your country. You need to be able to generate so much from your natural resource endowment. And the country is not doing well in that regards. The government of this country, the people of this country have to sit down and look at what is going wrong over there in the extractive sector.
While the country struggles to pay its debt, economists want the government to seek debt relief from their creditors. That is already being considered. Ghana's finance minister has called on private sector creditors to also join an extended G20 debt service suspension initiative that allows participating nations to delay payments. The initiative has since April deferred at least $5 billion of debt for more than 40 developing countries. For now, it's uncertain if Ghana will get some debt relief from its creditors, but the World Bank has urged African countries, including Ghana, to rein in spending and increase tax revenues to avoid defaulting on their debt. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Staying in the region, the IMF has predicted a better outlook for Nigeria's economy compared to its estimate in June. The revised forecast comes at a time when Nigeria's government says it's not considering the relief package offered by the World Bank for low-income countries following the COVID-19 pandemic. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza has the story.
The IMF says Nigeria's economy will do better next year. In June, the global body said Africa's largest economy would shrink by 5.4%, but now predicts a contraction of 4.3%.
And from all indications, the economy is being opened gradually. So by December this year, Nigeria may likely open the entire economy. Every sector of the economy will be back again. And this will affect the GDP in a very positive way. Secondly, the oil price in the market is improving. And it's now on the average of $40 per barrel. By December or by first quarter of next year, it may improve to about 50 or so, because more economy in the world will improve.
And as Nigeria's economy improves, the government has turned down a debt relief plan from the World Bank. According to the government, keeping its reputation with its creditors is important. It also insists the country can afford to service its debt without World Bank support. However, Nigeria's debt is at a record level of $82 billion, so it's expected to have to reduce spending in some areas to bring borrowing under control.
Government can also reduce their own recurrent expenditure. Inasmuch that it's not advisable to reduce the number of government employees, because they will likely lead towards social unrest. But government can create more system to manage their recurrent expenditure, because as it's now, there are many ghost workers in the payroll of the government.
President Muhammadu Buhari has intensified efforts to ensure new salary platforms are put in place to combat fraud in the civil service.
The World Bank warns that despite African countries like Nigeria recording lower cases of coronavirus compared to other regions of the world, more vigilance is needed to avoid further outbreak of the COVID-19 disease. This, it says, will prevent another phase of lockdown which may cripple the economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says trade talks between the UK and the EU are over, and there was no basis for planned talks next week unless there was a major shift in Brussels' approach.
It's clear from the summit that after 45 years of membership, they are not willing, unless there's some fundamental change of approach, to offer this country the same terms as Canada.
Well, EU leaders, for their part, demand Britain compromise on fair trade rules. Tony Waterman reports on how Brussels is reacting to Johnson's stance.
It's that time in the negotiating process where the chests start to puff. The UK's threat of a no-deal Brexit, though, did little to deflate Brussels. Leaders instead doubled down on demands for concessions in the ongoing trade talks.
We want an agreement. We're aware that this requires effort, in particular from the United Kingdom, but we must bear in mind that it was the UK that wanted to leave the European Union.
While gaps have narrowed, both sides are struggling to find common ground on fisheries, fair competition, and governance. The impasse has left the deal on a knife's edge as the UK's final break from the bloc at the end of the year looms.
I hope that it will be possible to make progress in the future, but I repeat, we are determined to reach a deal, but not at any cost.
But even as threats of a no-deal crash-out hurl across the channel, plans are afoot for talks to resume. Downing Street said both sides agreed to a phone call next week. It's less than Brussels was initially looking for. Earlier, Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen tweeted that the EU's negotiation team will go to London to intensify talks.
Brexit was just one of the many thorny topics the EU leaders covered during their two-day summit in Brussels. Coronavirus also took center stage, not only because of the massive spike in cases across the continent, but also because two leaders were forced to duck out early and self-isolate.
Ursula von der Leyen was the first to go. Then came Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin. Both women said they had close contact with someone who later tested positive for coronavirus. It led to questions about why leaders would risk meeting in person, a move defended by the council chief, who said sensitive topics need to be thrashed out in person.
Yesterday we had a very intense and important discussion on Brexit, and I think it would have been very difficult to have those discussions using video conference.
But if COVID-19 infections continue to skyrocket, leaders may have no choice when they meet again in December, a summit which could prove even more sensitive as leaders tussle over a new 2030 climate target, something they delayed this time around, and as they try to tie up any loose Brexit-related ends before the end of the year.
And still to come here on Africa Live. African movies making it to the international stage after years in the shadows.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's now head to the movies, and African filmmakers are now enjoying international success. This comes after Netflix began streaming more content produced on the continent.
Is there any news on the gang's whereabouts?
No, Nick, it's your job to tell us.
The Kenyan-made film Poacher is now on Netflix. It's a dramatic portrayal of the poaching situation in the East African nation. For the producers, it did not come easy.
So this has really been a process for us. It took about 2 years from initial writing to actually starting shooting, and then another 2 years to get it onto Netflix. Raising money, we begged, borrowed, and almost stole. We went the crowdfunder route.
The film departs from the normal documentary format, but has been used to tackle the grim realities posed by the illegal activity. However, it's not just the approach that differs. It's the milestones that the producers have achieved of having their content on the world's largest streaming platform.
That's very exciting. It's also a bit nerve-wracking, seeing as Netflix is the biggest platform for online streaming content. So we're just looking forward to seeing how people will respond to it. And hopefully we'll take a few more steps towards actualizing the whole vision of Poacher.
We'll see how you perform this night now.
Another film from Nigeria, Olutere, is also telling the African story. It's based on a journalist whose life unravels after she goes undercover as a sex worker.
A madam who takes people to Europe.
She's drugged and later raped by a respected businessman and philanthropist. The film seeks to highlight the realities of women who are lured and later trafficked into prostitution overseas.
Everything that has happened. And I feel like people need to see how these things happen so that we can help do something about it, so that we can help stop it, whether it's trying to help young women, trying to empower young women to find other ways and other solutions to figuring out their lives rather than going on this horrible journey.
Unlike most Nigerian films that are soap opera based with lavish sets, this film was shot in the dark streets of Lagos. These are not the only African movies blazing the trail on Netflix. In June, a romantic comedy titled Cook Off from Zimbabwe also streamed on Netflix. Hollywood has been blamed for stereotyping Africa, and the rise of African content on the global platforms seeks to end the simplistic portrayal of Africa by foreigners, who may not have a deeper understanding on issues affecting the continent. Robert Magilla, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
And here's what's coming up in the sports. The Confederation of African Football